What happens when two of television's most outspoken personalities clash on live television in a way that nobody saw coming? What happens when a simple guest appearance turns into a verbal battlefield that leaves producers scrambling and audience members stunned into silence? Today, we're diving into the explosive confrontation between Ellen DeGeneres and Joy Behar that ended with security being called and Ellen being escorted off the View set. This isn't just another celebrity disagreement. This is a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral out of control when egos collide and old wounds get ripped wide open. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really triggered this entire meltdown. The morning started like any other at the View Studios in New York. The makeup artists were putting finishing touches on the hosts. The audience was filing into their seats and the production crew was running through their final checks. Ellen DeGeneres had been booked as a guest to promote her latest project. What should have been a routine appearance for someone who had done countless talk show circuits over the years. The producers were expecting light banter, maybe some discussion about her recent ventures and the usual promotional material that keeps these shows running smoothly. Joy Behar was in particularly good spirits that morning, cracking jokes with the crew and seeming genuinely excited about having Ellen on the show. The two had crossed paths many times over the years in the entertainment industry, but their relationship had always been more professional than personal. There was a mutual respect between them, or at least that's what everyone assumed until the cameras started rolling and the real personalities emerged from behind their carefully crafted public personas. As Ellen walked onto the set, the audience erupted in their typical enthusiastic applause. She waved, smiled her signature smile, and took her seat at the guest chair positioned strategically between the hosts. The lighting was perfect, the cameras were rolling, and everything seemed to be going according to plan. Whoopi Goldberg handled the introductions with her usual warm professionalism, and the conversation began with the kind of softball questions that guests expect when they are making promotional appearances. "So, Ellen, tell us about this new project you're working on." Whoopi began, settling into what everyone thought would be a comfortable interview rhythm. Ellen launched into her prepared talking points, discussing her latest venture with the enthusiasm and charm that had made her a household name for decades. The audience was engaged. The other hosts were nodding along appropriately, and for the first few minutes, everything was proceeding exactly as the producers had scripted in their pre-show meetings. But then Joy Behar decided to steer the conversation in a different direction. And that's when the temperature in the studio began to rise in ways that nobody could have anticipated. "You know," Ellen Joy interjected with a slight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've been wondering about something for a while now. You've built this entire brand around being kind and spreading positivity, but there have been some interesting stories floating around about what it's really like to work with you behind the scenes." The comment landed like a stone thrown into still water, sending ripples of tension throughout the studio. Ellen's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. But that momentary crack was enough to signal that something had shifted in the dynamic between the two women. The audience sensed it immediately. That electric feeling when you know you're witnessing something that wasn't supposed to happen, something that's about to go off script in a very real and very uncomfortable way. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Joy," Ellen replied, her voice maintaining its professional tone, but with an edge that wasn't there moments before. "I've always tried to create positive work environments wherever I go, and I think the people I've worked with over the years would attest to that." Her hands, which had been gesturing naturally during her earlier responses, were now clasped tightly in her lap, a subtle but telling sign that she was preparing for whatever was coming next. Joy leaned forward slightly, and anyone who had watched The View for any length of time knew that this was her tell. The physical cue that indicated she was about to press harder on whatever point she was trying to make. "Oh, come on, Ellen. We're all friends here, right? I mean, there were those reports about your show, about how demanding you could be with staff members, some pretty specific stories about how you treated people when the cameras weren't rolling. I'm just curious about your perspective on all of that." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the audience, which had been murmuring and rustling in their seats throughout the interview, went completely quiet. It was the kind of silence that makes television producers break out in cold sweats. The kind of dead air that feels like it stretches on forever, even though it only lasts for a few seconds. Ellen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and when she spoke again, her voice had taken on a quality that regular viewers of her show had rarely, if ever, heard before. "Joy, I think there might be some confusion here about what kind of interview this was supposed to be," Ellen said, her words carefully measured, but carrying an unmistakable warning. I came here to talk about my current projects, not to relitigate old tabloid gossip that has been thoroughly addressed already. Maybe we should get back to the reason I'm actually here today. But Joy Behar was not backing down, and what happened next would become the moment that everyone would remember when they talked about this interview for years to come. She tilted her head slightly, maintaining eye contact with Ellen in a way that was clearly intended to be confrontational, and delivered the line that would ignite the powder keg that had been building since the moment she first brought up Ellen's reputation. Addressed. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like you just waited for the story to blow over without ever really taking responsibility for how you treated people. And honestly, Ellen, sitting here talking to you right now, I'm starting to understand what those employees were talking about. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion, and Ellen's entire demeanor changed in that instant. Gone was any pretense of media-trained politeness, replaced by something raw and unfiltered that caught everyone in the studio completely off guard. Her voice, when she responded, was no longer the carefully modulated tone of a seasoned television professional, but something much sharper and more personal. You know what, Joy? Ellen said, her voice cutting through the studio silence like a blade. I think I'm starting to understand something, too. I'm understanding why your show has had so much turnover over the years and why so many people in this industry have very specific opinions about working with you. Maybe we should talk about that instead. The audience collectively gasped, and you could practically feel the other hosts shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Whoopi's eyes went wide and she started to lean forward as if she was preparing to step in. But Joy held up a hand that clearly said she could handle this herself. The smile had completely disappeared from Joy's face now, replaced by a look of genuine surprise that someone had just turned her own tactics back on her with such precision and venom. Excuse me. Joy shot back, her voice rising in both pitch and volume. Did you just come onto my show and try to attack me personally? Because that's really rich coming from someone who built an entire empire on fake niceness while apparently terrorizing her staff behind the scenes. At least I'm honest about who I am. Ellen actually laughed at that, but it wasn't the warm, infectious laugh that millions of viewers had come to know and love. This was something cold and sharp. The kind of laugh that makes everyone around you immediately uncomfortable because you know it's not coming from a place of humor, but from something much darker and more personal. Fake niceness. That's what you think this is about. Ellen's voice was getting louder now, and she was no longer making any effort to maintain her media-trained composure. Joy, you've made a career out of being deliberately provocative and stirring up controversy, and now you want to sit here and lecture me about authenticity. You want to talk about fake. Let's talk about how you pretend to be this champion of progressive values while you tear down other women the moment you think it'll get you better ratings. The tension in the studio was now so thick you could cut it with a knife. The cameras were still rolling, but you could see the production crew frantically gesturing to each other, clearly trying to figure out whether they should cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue to unfold in real time. The audience was completely silent now. Not the comfortable quiet of people listening intently, but the stunned silence of people who were witnessing something they never expected to see. Joy's face was flushed red now, and when she spoke again, her voice had taken on the sharp edge that regular viewers of The View knew meant she was about to unleash everything she had been holding back. You want to talk about tearing down women? Let's talk about how you created a toxic workplace where your female employees were afraid to speak up, where they had to walk on eggshells around your massive ego. Let's talk about how you preached kindness while practicing cruelty behind closed doors. That is enough, Ellen said, standing up from her chair so abruptly that it almost toppled over behind her. I did not come here to be ambushed by someone who clearly has some kind of personal agenda against me. This is supposed to be a professional interview, not some kind of character assassination disguised as daytime television. But Joy was standing now, too, and she was clearly not finished with whatever point she was trying to make. Oh, so now it's an ambush because I asked you some legitimate questions about your behavior. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Ellen. The moment someone challenges you or calls you out on anything, suddenly you're the victim. Suddenly, everyone else is the problem except for you. You know what your problem is, Joy? Ellen shot back, her voice now raised enough that everyone in the studio could hear every word crystal clear. Your problem is that you've been sitting behind this desk for so long, thinking you can say whatever you want about whoever you want that you've forgotten there are actual consequences for your words. You think you can just attack people and hide behind the excuse that it's journalism or entertainment or whatever justification helps you sleep at night. The other hosts were now looking like deer caught in headlights, clearly wanting to intervene, but not knowing how to step into the middle of what had become a very personal and very heated exchange between two people who were no longer holding anything back. Tsunami host had her hand over her mouth, and Sarah Haynes was staring with wide eyes, probably wondering how a simple promotional interview had turned into whatever this had become. Consequences. Joy laughed. But like Ellen's earlier laugh, there was no humor in it whatsoever. You want to talk about consequences. How about we talk about the consequences your employees faced when they had to deal with your diva behavior day after day? How about we talk about the people who lost their jobs because they couldn't meet your impossible standards or because they made the mistake of having an opinion that didn't align with yours? Ellen took a step closer to the desk, and for a moment, everyone in the studio thought she might actually walk over to where Joy was standing. Her face was flushed now, too, and her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. You don't know what you're talking about, Joy. You're repeating gossip and rumors and treating them like facts. And you're doing it on national television to someone who came here as your guest. This is beyond unprofessional. It's actually disgusting. Disgusting. Joy's voice cracked slightly on the word. And you could tell that Ellen had hit a nerve. You know what's disgusting? Having a platform as big as yours and using it to present this perfect image while treating the people who work for you like disposable objects. You know what's disgusting? Coming on shows like this and pretending to be some kind of victim when people finally start asking you the hard questions. The argument was spiraling now, completely out of control. And both women were saying things that they probably never would have said if they had taken a moment to think about the consequences. But thinking clearly wasn't really an option anymore because this had moved beyond a professional disagreement into something much more personal and much more volatile. I am done with this, Ellen said, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. I am done with you. I am done with this show, and I am done pretending that this is anything other than a deliberate attempt to humiliate me on national television. You want to have an honest conversation, Joy? Here's some honesty for you. You are a bitter, nasty person who gets off on making other people miserable. And I feel sorry for anyone who has to work with you or be around you for any extended period of time. The words landed like physical blows, and Joy's face went completely white before turning an even deeper shade of red than before. When she responded, her voice was trembling with rage, and every word was delivered with the kind of venom that makes it clear that any pretense of professional civility has been completely abandoned, bitter, and nasty. Joy's voice was now shaking with pure fury, and she was gripping the edge of the desk so tightly that her knuckles had turned completely white. You want to see bitter and nasty Ellen? How about we talk about the real Ellen DeGeneres? The one who fires people for making eye contact with her. The one who has tantrums when her coffee isn't the right temperature. The one who built an entire career on telling people to be kind while being absolutely cruel to anyone who couldn't fight back. Ellen's face went completely pale and then flushed red again so quickly that it looked like someone had flipped a switch. How dare you, she said, her voice now barely controlled, each word enunciated with crystal clarity. How dare you sit there and make up stories about me? How dare you invite me onto your show just so you could attack me with lies and gossip? You are everything that is wrong with this industry, Joy. You are a toxic, vindictive person who destroys people for entertainment. I'm toxic. Joy shot back, her voice reaching a pitch that was making everyone in the studio wr. I'm vindictive. That's really something coming from someone who allegedly kept a list of employees she wanted to get rid of. Someone who created such a hostile work environment that people were afraid to look at her wrong. At least when I'm difficult to work with, I own it. I don't hide behind some fake persona about spreading love and kindness. By this point, Whoopi was frantically trying to get both women's attention, waving her hands and trying to speak loud enough to be heard over their argument. Ladies, we need to take this down a notch here. This is getting way out of hand, and we need to remember that we're on live television. But neither Ellen nor Joy was paying any attention to Whoopi or anyone else in the studio. They were completely locked in on each other, and the argument had reached a point where rational thought had been completely abandoned in favor of saying whatever would hurt the most. You know what, Joy? Ellen said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level that was somehow more intimidating than when she had been shouting. The difference between you and me is that I actually accomplished something with my career. I built something meaningful. I entertained millions of people. I made a difference in the world. What have you done? You sit behind this desk every day and tear down people who are actually out there creating things, contributing something positive to the world. You a parasite, Joy. You feed off other people's success and other people's problems, and you have the audacity to act like you're some kind of moral authority. The insult hit Joy like a physical blow, and for a moment, she was actually speechless, which was probably the first time in her entire career on The View that she had been rendered completely unable to respond. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, with both women staring at each other across the desk with undisguised hatred, while everyone else in the studio held their breath waiting to see what would happen next. When Joy finally found her voice again, it was with the kind of venom that makes it clear that all gloves are now officially off. A parasite. That's what you think I am? Well, let me tell you what I think you are, Ellen. I think you're a fraud. I think you're a mean, selfish, egotistical fraud who fooled the world into thinking you were this sweet, a kind person when really you were just a narcissist who couldn't handle anyone challenging your perfect little bubble. And you know what the really pathetic part is? Even now, even when you're caught red-handed being exactly the person everyone said you were, you still can't take responsibility for any of it. Ellen was trembling with rage now. And when she spoke, her voice was so loud that it could probably be heard in the hallway outside the studio. That is it. I am done with this. I am done with you. And I am done with this pathetic excuse for a television show. You want to know who the real fraud is, Joy? It's someone who pretends to be a journalist while really just being a gossip columnist with a bigger platform. It's someone who attacks people and then acts surprised when they defend themselves. She started walking toward the exit, but Joy wasn't finished with her yet. Oh, that's right, Ellen. Just walk away. That's what you always do when someone finally calls you out on your behavior. Just walk away and let your publicist clean up the mess later. But you can't walk away from the truth. And the truth is that you're not the person you pretended to be for all those years. Ellen spun around and the look on her face was absolutely furious. You want the truth, Joy? Here's the truth. You are a miserable, bitter woman who is jealous of anyone who has achieved more success than you have. You can't stand the fact that I built something bigger and better than anything you ever could. So, you tear me down to make yourself feel better. That's not journalism. That's just petty jealousy. At this point, the producers had clearly decided that enough was enough because you could see security personnel starting to move toward the set. But before they could intervene, Joy stood up from behind the desk and took a step toward Ellen. And for a moment, it looked like this verbal confrontation might actually become physical. Jealous of you? Joy's voice was now so loud that she was practically screaming. I wouldn't trade places with you for anything in the world, Ellen. At least I can look at myself in the mirror every morning and know that I'm being honest about who I am. Can you say the same thing? Can you honestly say that you're proud of the person you really are when the cameras aren't rolling? I don't have to justify myself to you or to anyone else. Ellen shot back, her voice matching Joy's volume. Especially not to someone who has made a career out of being deliberately offensive and calling it entertainment. You're not asking tough questions, Joy. You're just being cruel for the sake of being cruel. And frankly, it's pathetic. That was the moment when security finally stepped in with two large men in dark suits moving quickly onto the set and positioning themselves between the two women. We're going to need you to come with us, one of them said to Ellen, his voice calm, but firm in the way that made it clear this wasn't really a request. Ellen looked around the studio, taking in the shocked faces of the audience, the other hosts, who were still sitting frozen in their chairs, and Joy, who was still standing behind the desk with her face flushed red and her chest heaving from the exertion of the argument. This is unbelievable, Ellen said, shaking her head. This is absolutely unbelievable. I came here as a professional courtesy, and this is how I get treated. The only thing that's unbelievable, Joy called out as Ellen was being escorted toward the exit, is that it took this long for someone to finally see through your act. Good luck explaining this one to your fans, Ellen. Good luck spinning this into another victim story. Ellen turned around one more time before she reached the exit and delivered her final words with the kind of cold precision that made it clear she was done playing games. You know what, Joy? I feel sorry for you. I genuinely feel sorry for anyone who is so miserable with their own life that they have to destroy other people to feel better about themselves. Enjoy your ratings boost from this little stunt because that's all this was ever about for you. And with that, Ellen DeGeneres walked off the View set, escorted by security, leaving behind one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. The studio was dead silent except for the sound of her footsteps echoing as she disappeared behind the cameras while Joy stood behind the desk, still breathing heavily, staring at the spot where Ellen had been standing just moments before. What did you think of this incredible confrontation? Was Joy right to press Ellen on these tough questions? Or did she cross a line? And what do you think really triggered Ellen to snap the way she did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe for more shocking celebrity stories that you won't believe actually.